Let's start with Davinci Resolve. We are going to see the first steps, like all my courses where. The first thing I want us to do is familiarize ourselves with the Davinci Resolve interface. We are going to see in a general way what we have, what this application offers us, and what we are going to find on our Davinci Resolve screen. Well, let's go to the computer, and once we open Davinci Resolve, the first screen that will appear is a screen like this one. Okay, what do we have here? Here we have where our project is going to be saved. Let's say this is equivalent to the Final Cut libraries. Here we can, for example, open the location of the folder, and here you can see where the Davinci Resolve libraries are hosted. Let's say you call it the database, and it is that all the libraries and all the projects. Let's say that we are not going to find it in a folder of our Windows or Mac directory, but that we are going to always find it in this window. This is where we will find all our projects that come in the local database unit. We continue here. Here we see this little button. It is that we can unfold or fold all the part that we have here. Okay, here we can create a new database, and we can tell it where we want our location. For example, I'm going to create one on another hard drive that I have. I have another SD disk, and here we are going to create in the folder that I have Davinci Resolve courses, and we are going to create a folder. Because if we don't create a folder, look at what happens if I tell him that I want to put it here, and I tell him. Once this is created, I tell it to create. It tells me that it creates an empty folder for the new database. It won't let you. So what we can do is create a new folder right here. Let's call database course Davinci Resolve Veil, with which in this folder we are going to create it. This has been created for us. Let's say if we come from Final Cut, it would be our Davinci Resolve course library, and well, let's continue. We already know this. We can fold and unfold. Here would be to put the project's bigger or smaller icon. This is very intuitive. This right here, we can order all the projects that we have here, which we will see later according to these criteria by name, modification date, timelines, format, frequency, etc. Here it gives us a series of information on how there is this project. For example, this one here, which comes by default, is at 1920 instead of 1080. Here we can put the list of mosaics or in list, where we already have more information. For example, here we see at a glance that this project is in 1920 by 1080 format, 24 frames per second, and when it has been created, these little buttons here are not valid, since backing up would be to make a backup copy of your database. This one here that says restore would be for a backup copy that we have created to restore it, and this one here would be to connect with a database that we have online. Well, I don't usually use it much, but if we have editors that work online, for example, we would put the IP address here and connect to their database. Then we have here the information of where the library is hosted. Let's call it the Veil Database Library from the Davinci Resolve course, and here we could look for libraries very intuitively. Okay, so we have already seen this about creating a database. Here we would give it to create project. We can create folders. If I create a new folder in the Davinci Resolve course, let it be called, for example, let's put the test interface. Okay, I create the folder. And now inside this folder I double click, I open it, and here I could create a new project. We click on create project that is going to be called, because in this case it tests for the course, and once we click on create, we are going to open what is the Davinci Resolve interface itself. We would give him to create. And well, this is the first thing we find when we open Davinci Resolve. At first it scares us or makes us a little lazy because we don't know it, but I already tell you that when you meet it and when you become familiar with it, you are going to freak out at how easy it is and how intuitive it is. And you will see, you won't have any problem with Final Cut and Adobe Premiere. He has even put with you what you want that you are going to edit with Davinci Resolve. Okay, let's start. Well, obviously like any editing program, we have a bar at the top where here, for example, we have the first of Davinci Resolve. I don't think it's exactly the same on Mac, but hey, it's similar. Here we see about keyboard customization, which is quite important to check for updates. The preferences, which we will also see later or go out later in file. We can create projects. Create one. Create a timeline. Create an open timeline that we will also see it. Save the project. Save the project as import media. Import projects. Export. Export project. Here we have everything typical of a file menu in editing, like undo, redo, history, cut, paste, delete, selected, delete, and spread. We are going to see all this, do not worry. Select all, deselect, select, insert, overwrite, replace. Those of you who come from Premiere will already know this. Okay, trim same timeline. Look, add transition. This has its own shortcuts that we are going to use as well. Well, an endless clip mark and point out point everything is here, but I use these options the most with keyboard shortcuts. See that we are going to use it to reproduce everything we are going to use. Fusion, which is the color effects editing screen, where we will see all the color grading. Fairlight, which is the audio editor, work areas, and help. That's the top. Well, this is quite extensive. I will try to go little by little. Here we have a multimedia panel where all our clips will appear. although we are really going to go down here first, which interests me a lot more, because notice that here we have a tab called Media. Here we are in Assembly. What do you see as if it were there with something that has speed, right? That means it's for quick assembly. I say it right away. I don't usually use the montage window unless it's something very simple that I have to simply cut 2 clips, paste them and export it. That's it, we are not in this course for this. What we are going to do is video editing, with which we are going to see very little of the montage window. Once you know the edit tab, which is the next one, this will be very intuitive. It changes a few things. So far the scissors, this. But hey, we'll see if it comes to an end. But I say that we're going to do everything from this edit tab, okay? And the medium tab. Well, it's to keep it organized in folders that we're going to see when we start importing material. I'm also telling you, we're going to do everything from editing, okay? But hey, it would be nice to review where you can create folders, view clips, etc. But everything is going to be done from here in the editing tab, because here we can access the multimedia panel. The multimedia panel where we are going to see everything in this area from here. If we give it, we hide it, we put it effect library. The same here we have the effects library, very similar to the one in Final Cut. Here we can fold or unfold. Notice that the timeline is gone. Over there and here we have more space. Okay, everything works very intuitive and quite simple. Well, let's continue. We have, as we have seen, the effect library, which we will see, the record that we will see, and the sound library that we will also see. Okay, we are going to see all this. Well, we're going to leave it in the multimedia panel and we're going to display it here, okay? Note that here it may be that you only get this canvas. I also have the source monitor. I explain why. If you are working on a small laptop, you probably do not have space for the source monitor and the canvas to be displayed, which is the preview of our timeline. Don't worry, nothing happens, so the source monitor is quite useful. Okay, yes, if you use a larger monitor it will appear directly to you. But hey, let's go to it's useful because we can preview the origin, create in and out point to know what we're going to put in our timeline and work in a more orderly and better way. But I already say that if you don't see it, don't be scared, it's because your monitor, if I'm working on a tiny laptop, won't show it to you. Okay, well, we have already said it. Here we have the canvas that is very similar to the Final Cut. Notice that here we have the transform menu just like Final Cut. Then up here we have this to see the equalizer down here. Now since there's only one track, it only appears to me. This is the mixer, the metadata. If we had to go, we'll see him later. And the inspector? Guys, the inspector already sounds a lot like Final Cut does. And it resembles what effect controls would be in Adobe Premiere, where we can see video, audio, effects, transitions, images and anything goes. I'm telling you this, we'll see it when we import the odd clip. Well, this here would be to deactivate or activate the color corrections or effects that we have made. Here in the color tab, in the blend tab we're going to go look at it now. This obviously can also be displayed downwards or folded later here in the source monitor, both in the canvas monitor, which is where we are going to see the preview later. We have these little buttons that we will see when the time comes. Also the timeline that is here below that we will dedicate a complete course to the timeline and many tricks that I have to teach you with Davinci Resolve. These 2 little button here. This is the general audio of the project, which I can download or upload, including this little button here that turns almost yellow. Okay, do you see that the volume is lower? It's like not modifying anything in the project, only that while we edit we can listen to it with a lower volume and more, let's say more comfortable, right? The interesting thing about Davinci Resolve, since we've seen it and I don't think I left anything we have. Well, this is the way of seeing the timeline, that we are going to see this when we have it, when we see the timeline, because we can adapt it to what we like best. For example, I use another one that you are going to see later and I think you are going to use it too. And what was saying the most interesting thing, Davinci Resolve, I forgot, these 2 little buttons here are very important, okay? This would take us to the main tab that we saw before. We go back to our project and this one here is very, very, very important. This right here is where we're going to tell you what type of project or what is the resolution above all that we want for this project. For example, I'm going to leave it at 1920 by 1080, but as I usually edit and record, it's 29.97 frames per second, which are the frames at which I'm recording with the camera normally. Okay, I'm not going to get too into frames per second. If you want, I'll leave you this little label that appears here, where you can see everything about frames per second and I'll explain more or less so that you understand which frames per second to use in each case, because it's important. And well, that's it, we'll leave it at that. The rest we are not going to touch anything else. Okay, we are simply interested in this course in the resolution and the frames per second that we are going to record. We will also see all this, which are preferences, during the course, but a little later. Okay, so once we have the main settings the way we want them, we click save and this project would be according to our needs. Okay, and well, what I was saying, we have seen that here we have the media tab, then the editing tab that I'm going to skip, and if we're going to do that at the end of the course, the editing tab, which is where we're going to spend most of the time. Of our time, the Fusion tab is also valid. Fusion is the same thing, but it's integrated here into Davinci Resolve. It would be the equivalent for Adobe Premiere. It would be After Effects, which is the effects editor, and for Final Cut it would be Motion. It would be the Final Cut effects editor. Well, here we have it. Confusion that is fully integrated here in Davinci Resolve, which is super comfortable with. Then the color tab, which is wonderful what color grading has here, which we are also going to see. We are going to dedicate a course, a single chapter. We can dedicate a complete course to this, but with a chapter to see the basics of the character that serves us. And then we have the Fairlight tab, which would be the equivalent in the Adobe package. It would be the equivalent of Adobe Audition, but we have it integrated here as well in Davinci Resolve, which I'm normally using now to record the audio from this microphone. Although since I'm teaching it I can't have it recording it, but I'm using Adobe Audition which we have here. If you realize here I am recording the audio of what you're listening to at the moment. Okay, and then we have the Delivery tab, which is going to be the tab that we are going to use to correctly export our videos that we already have. It's very simple, because many times I have YouTube's default here at 1080, which is my YouTube videos go to 1080 and simply with what we have edited here it is automatically exported in that resolution, which is the appropriate resolution for YouTube in this case or the one that suits YouTube best. Well, that's it. The purpose of this chapter was for us to familiarize ourselves a little with the Davinci Resolve interface, to take away the fear that it is all about half assembly, editing, merging. Do not be afraid of him because he is quite intuitive. He is quite cool. Most of the time we're going to spin it in the edit tab, but of course we're going to see blending stuff, we're going to see color, we're going to see everything, but everything. You are going to see what can be done from this editing window. Okay, and nothing. I just have to tell you what I always tell you guys, and it is that I always make these videos for free for you and I do them for two reasons. If it is because I want to and because I feel like it. Of course, I ask you for a little something in exchange for you losing a second of your lives and hitting the subscribe button and activating the bell. Because this man, that for you is nothing, that is a second of your life. The truth is that it helps us, the content creators, a lot to be able to keep our channels alive and to be able to continue making these types of videos for you. So without further ado, see you in the next video that we are going to title it, Import Content to Davinci Resolve. So see you in the next one. Bye.